Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ismail Tradingwala, and today I have made a flip. So today we are here with another AI session, and today our topic is why losing feels worse than winning feels good. So today it is our topic. Hi ChatGPT, how are you and how are you doing? So today our topic is about why losing feels worse than winning feels good.
Hey, I'm doing really well. Hey, I'm doing really well. Thanks for asking. That's a fascinating topic. There's something about losing that really sticks with us, like it hits harder and lingers more, whereas a win, though great, kind of fades faster. What got you thinking about that?
So why is losing average sun in gaming?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think a big part of it is how our brains are wired. Psychologically, losses tend to feel more significant than gains because they might threaten our sense of competence or status. Also, we tend to dwell on mistakes or what went wrong, which kind of amplifies the sting. Does that ring true for you, or do you feel it's something else?
Why does losing feel worse than winning feels good?
Yeah, so at its core, it's often about how we evaluate risk and reward. Losing taps into a fear of loss. In fact, some studies say a loss can feel about twice as powerful as a gain. And then there's the uncertainty that comes with losing, like, what if I failed? What did I do wrong? Meanwhile, winning tends to confirm something positive we already hoped for, so it just doesn't linger as long. It's really a quirk of human emotion.
Okay, why does losing? How does what emotions are triggered by losing? Triggered by losing.
Good question. So, losing can trigger a bunch of emotions, things like frustration, disappointment, even shame or self doubt. A lot of times, it can activate a sense of what if, thinking about missed chances or worrying that we'll be judged. And sometimes it even sparks a fear of future failure, like a kind of protective anxiety. It's a pretty complex mix.
Okay, so how does if affection investment increase the pain of losing?
Yeah, absolutely. When you really care about something, whether it's a sport, a project, or even a relationship, the stakes are higher. So the loss feels like more than just the outcome. It feels like a personal blow. You almost tie your identity or self worth to that thing. And so losing becomes more like a reflection on you. That emotional weight just amplifies the pain.
Okay, so how does ego influence reaction to defeat?
Oh, ego plays a huge role. When our ego is tied up in how we perform or how others see us, a defeat can feel like a direct threat to that self image. So we might react with defensiveness, anger, or even avoidance. We don't want to confront that ego hit. If we can separate our sense of worth from the outcome, though, it's easier to handle and grow from defeat.
Hmm. So how does control or lack of affection um, lose perception?
Yeah, that's a really good point. When we have too little affection, we might detach, so we don't really feel the sting as much. We stay more indifferent. But when we have a strong sense of affection, we invest emotionally, and that makes a loss feel like a bigger betrayal or a bigger personal hit. So it's kind of a balance. Too little and you feel distant, too much and you're deeply affected.
Okay, so why do near wins feel worse than certain losses?
Yeah, so it's kind of like an evolutionary quirk, too. In a way, losing taps into a survival instinct. Our brains want to avoid pain because it signals risk or failure. Winning feels good, of course, but it doesn't trigger that same deep avoidance instinct. So, on a subconscious level, losing is just more powerful. It's a signal we don't want to repeat.
Okay, can winning fully offset the negative feeling of losing?
It definitely can, especially if you reflect on what the win means to you. Wins give a sense of progress and competence, and they remind you of your potential. But it's important to give yourself time to process the loss first. If you can acknowledge both your disappointment and your success, it balances out. It won't erase the sting, but it can keep it in perspective.
So, so is losing a kind of worse or something good when losing feel good, and what the, is it a part or it's legs or it is a culture?
Yeah, it's kind of a mix. On one hand, evolution and biology shape how we perceive loss, so it's kind of hardwired in some ways. But culturally, too, different societies value either resilience or they downplay failure, and that affects how we feel. So losing can be a catalyst for growth, or it can just be this heavy weight, depending on your mindset and the culture around you.
Okay, so why does how does adrenaline affections like kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we admit affection or care, we're kind of making ourselves vulnerable. It's like we're saying, I really invested in this, so the loss means something. And that vulnerability, ironically, can intensify the sting of failure. But at the same time, it's also a sign of courage. It means you cared enough to be all in, even if it hurts.
Okay, so why does repeated losses create tilted in player?
Yeah, that's a really common experience. When we face repeated losses, it kind of chips away at our confidence. Over time, it can build a sense of helplessness or even a fear of trying again. Basically, it's like the brain starts expecting failure, so the pain of each loss compounds, making it harder to bounce back. But if we can
Mm,
interrupt that pattern with reflection or small wins, it can help break that cycle.
so why do losses trigger strong memory than wins?
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, a big part of it is that negative experiences tend to stand out more in our memory. They kind of burn in more strongly. Our brains evolved to notice threats and mistakes as a survival mechanism, so we recall those harder moments more vividly. Wins, even though they feel good, just don't get that same deep emotional imprint. So, the sting of loss is just stickier.
Okay, so how does fear of losing divine risk divine behavior in games?
Yeah, exactly. That fear of losing can really freeze us up. So instead of taking bold, calculated risks, we might play too safe. In a game, that can mean passing up opportunities, sticking to familiar strategies, or even quitting early to avoid potential embarrassment. So that fear kind of narrows our range of actions, keeping us from fully engaging with the game.
Okay, it can losing triggered. How does ego protection influence response things to loses losses?
Yeah, exactly. So ego protection kicks in as a defense mechanism. When we lose, if our ego's on the line, we might get defensive, either by denying the loss, blaming others, or downplaying the importance. In some cases, it can even lead us to avoid future risks entirely because we don't want to face that blow again. So ego tries to shield us, but it can also limit our growth.
Okay, so how does fear of losing divine risk and no? So can how loser triggers aggression towards teammates or opponent?
Yeah, that's a really common thing, actually. When we lose, especially if it feels personal or like a big stake, we can look for someone to blame. So frustration can get displaced onto teammates or opponents, even if it's not their fault. It's kind of a way to externalize the pain so we don't have to sit with the failure alone. But that can really strain relationships, so it's something we need to be mindful of.
Mm. No, so how does unpredictable amplify the pain of losing?
Yeah, unpredictability can be really tough because it robs us of that sense of control. When we lose but we can't predict it, like it just feels random, it's harder to make sense of it. We think, was it me? Was it just luck? That uncertainty can create more distress because we feel powerless, like we didn't even get a fair shot. So the unpredictability just magnifies the emotional sting.
Okay, so why do casually losing sometimes triggers more than expected?
Yeah, that's a really common thing. When we lose unexpectedly, it just catches us off guard. So we don't have that mental preparation. We might have been more confident or we thought we were safe, and so the surprise makes it hit harder. Plus, when we expect a certain outcome, we often brace ourselves, but when it's out of the blue, it just shocks us, and that shock amplifies the pain.
Yeah, so we will move on. So how do leaderboards engage losing?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we lose, if it feels like a big deal, it can really feed into that sense of shame or self doubt. We might start questioning our abilities or worth, and that can spiral into a fear of trying again. Guilt can also come up, like we feel we let ourselves or others down. So it's a heavy emotional cycle, and it takes some conscious work to break out of that guilt loop.
So so why do
Yeah,
rank drops feel more painful than rankings feel?
That's a great question. So when we lose rank, it's like a public marker of our decline. It's this external signal that we went backwards. It can feel more threatening than just a single win because it's tied to status, progress, and how we stack up against others. So a drop feels like a bigger identity hit, and that's why it stings so much more.
So how do paranoid or death penalties amplify losing?
Yeah, that's a key part of growth. So, first, it really helps to zoom out and remember it's just one moment, not the whole story. Reflect on what you can control your effort, your mindset, your next step, rather than just the outcome. And give yourself some grace. Losing doesn't define you, it's just part of the process. With that kind of perspective, you keep moving forward step by step.
Okay, so how does RNG create strong emotional swings?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. So when RNG is at play, it injects this sense of unpredictability. Like we might succeed or fail based on a random roll, not our skill. And that randomness can really spike emotions. Joy if it goes right, frustration or helplessness if it goes wrong. So it kind of bypasses logic and just hits straight at our emotional core.
So why do games create a new wins?
Yeah, exactly. Games give us these new wins because even when they rely on randomness or setbacks, they also give us these fresh starts. After a loss, there's another round, another chance. Each win, even a small one, gives us a sense of progress. And that cycle, loss, try again, win, keeps us hooked because it offers hope even after disappointment.
So how does effect to reward ratio after frustration?
Great point. So when frustration rises, the reward feels more distant or less satisfying. Even if we do get a win, it can feel small or hollow because the frustration's still sitting there. So our ratio, the balance between how much we put in and what we get back, gets thrown off. In other words, frustration kind of dilutes the satisfaction even when we do succeed. So it takes a bit of effort to recalibrate that ratio and remind ourselves of the progress.
So how does effects to win reward? How can designers use loses uh, engine for engagement lethal?
That's a big one. So, game designers often use a bit of strategic loss to keep us hooked. If we fail sometimes, it creates tension and challenge, which makes eventual wins feel bigger. By sprinkling in losses but balancing them with small victories, they keep coming back because we feel that progress even when we stumble. So, it's a dance. Just enough loss to spark determination, but enough reward to keep us motivated.
Hmm. So how do punishments reward loses explode human psychology?
Yeah, absolutely. So, punishment and reward really tap into our core drives, things like avoiding pain and seeking pleasure. Reward activates that dopamine system, so we feel motivated and energized. Punishment, on the other hand, taps into fear of loss. It creates stress and avoidance. So, games or even life experiences that balance these forces can really drive us. They push us to avoid failure, but also chase that sweet success.
So can how can design. Can high stakes gameplay overstress player?
Yeah, definitely. When stakes get too high, it pushes us into that fight or flight mode, and it can become overwhelming. Instead of feeling motivated, we can feel paralyzed, like the pressure just zaps our ability to perform. So, good design usually balances challenge enough to keep us engaged, but not so high that it overwhelms us. So, we stay in that sweet spot of tension, not burnout.
So how do players cope with repeated losses?
Yeah, that's really important. Players can bounce back by reframing the loss, not as a final verdict, but as a chance to learn. They can focus on small adjustments like refining strategy or skill. Also, taking a break to reset emotions helps, and sometimes just connecting with others, sharing the loss can help because you remember it's part of a bigger journey, not a final stop.
So why do some players become addiction to winning after a loss?
Yeah, it's kind of like a dopamine loop. After a loss, we often have this strong desire to prove ourselves, and that craving for a win can become almost compulsive. We get hooked on that rush, the idea that the next win will erase the last loss. So we chase that feeling, sometimes even ignoring balance or healthy risk. It's really that cycle of reward seeking after the pain.
So how do social bitters reduce losses pain?
Yeah, that's a great point. Social support is really key. When we share losses with others, friends, teammates, or even a community, we realize we're not alone. They can offer perspective, remind us that it's just one step, and help us reframe failure as a shared experience, not something isolating. So that connection can really soften the blow and keep us in the game.
How does personal growth and mindset reduce sitting of losing?
Yeah, exactly. So a growth mindset really changes how we interpret loss. Instead of seeing failure as a final verdict, we see it as a chance to learn, grow, and improve. So each loss becomes a stepping stone, something we analyze, adjust from, and use to build future success. That mindset shift takes the power out of defeat and channels it into progress, so we're less afraid to risk again.
Okay, so why do players rage more in public or competition setting?
Yeah, that's really tough. In public or competitive settings, the spotlight amplifies every loss, so it's natural to feel exposed. What helps is staying focused on the process, focusing on your technique or your effort rather than just the outcome. And it can help to reframe it as a personal challenge, not a public judgment. Also, remember that everyone loses, it's just part of the competition. So the more you normalize it, the less that public pressure defines you.
How do casual and competitive players predict losses difficulties?
Yeah, that's a great point. So, first, it's really about detaching your self worth from the outcome. If you focus on effort, learning, and small steps forward, you reduce the sting of a single loss. Also, give yourself a break. Acknowledge how you feel, but don't let it stop you from trying again. And keep reminding yourself progress is a long game, not just a single result.
So can psychology train reduce the sitting of losing?
Yeah, that's a really powerful tool. When we reframe failure as just a temporary setback, something we can learn from, it takes away some of that sting. We start to see each loss as a data point, a signpost for improvement, instead of a final judgment. And that shift lets us stay resilient, motivated to keep going, even when things don't go our way right away.
So can losing sensitivity machines harm mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. If those losses pile up, especially in really competitive or high stakes environments, it can lead to chronic stress, anxiety, and even burnout. Constant defeat without a healthy perspective can really wear on self esteem and mental health. So it's crucial to have a balance, support systems, reflection, and space to recover so that losses don't snowball into something really harmful.
So uh, how can should game expect it loss aversion?
Yeah, that's a great design question. So, a lot of it is about building in what we call failure safety nets. You can make sure the players have a gradual difficulty curve, give them chances to recover, or offer smaller, meaningful wins even after a big loss. By giving players a path to come back, they're less likely to just give up. They feel like they had an ongoing chance to improve.
How can losing sensitive machines harm? How can gaming make losing educational interest?
Ah, that's a really positive angle. So, gaming can make losing educational by framing it as a chance to experiment, iterate, and problem solve. When a game provides feedback, like showing why a strategy failed or offering new approaches, loss stops being just a dead end. Instead, it's a puzzle, something to analyze, adjust, and apply next time. So that turns every failure into a step toward mastery.
Should punishment machines be limited for casual players?
Yeah, exactly. If you frame it as a learning opportunity, like what can I try differently next time, it shifts from a harsh punishment to a gentle guide. Casual players especially need that safe space, so they're not just avoiding failure, but actually seeing it as a clue. And over time, that approach keeps them curious, engaged, and more confident to keep playing.
Can feedback system reduce those negative emotions from losing?
Yeah, that's a really thoughtful approach. The idea is to keep the feedback constructive and focused on actionable steps. So instead of just saying you failed, it might say, "Do you miss this tactic? Try adjusting this next time." Also, timing matters. If you give immediate, calm guidance, it helps diffuse that sting. So the goal is to keep the player curious, not discouraged, giving them a sense that each loss is just a step forward in disguise.
Or should sports designs account for lift for from losing stakes?
Yeah, absolutely. Good design really needs to account for that. If we understand that every player will feel lost differently, some will bounce back, others will dwell on it, we can build in ways to soften the blow. So, whether it's gradual progression, forgiving checkpoints, or reflective feedback, it helps keep motivation alive. When players see losing as just a temporary hurdle, it reduces that sense of helplessness and lets them keep going.
Ultimate question: can understanding lose vision making game more satisfactory?
Yeah, absolutely. When players can see a bigger picture, like they understand that each loss is a part of a longer journey, they feel more purpose behind each step. So the satisfaction comes not just from instant wins, but from seeing progress, mastering skills, and moving toward bigger goals. So when they lose, it's not just frustration, it's a meaningful step in a broader arc. And that makes the eventual success feel even sweeter.
Thank you for your time and thanks for your time and everyone who have watched till here. Like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.